Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus with some more Pioneer versus content. This particular time we're going with Blue-White Spirits versus Green-Black Delirium. As the format's still shaking out a little bit, there's a lot of untested decks. There's only been one or two big events. I think there was a challenge this past weekend, which I think Sultai mid-range ended up winning, and there was a lot of presence of Visit Phoenix, which I found interesting. A lot of copycat combo decks and some other stuff. But format still got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff to be tested. Kind of got to get down a little bit, start focusing on content a little bit more, but wanted to do at least one more kind of wide open versus video. This is a very similar list to one of our regular contributors, Janstrovik, also some other people's lists, especially the sideboard I think was a copy of card for card somebody else's sideboard, which was pretty interesting. I found it to be a pretty balanced sideboard. So the main thing with this list is you're a spirits-based deck based around Supreme Phantom and Empyrean Eagle, kind of boosting the rest of your deck. Mausoleum Wanderer, kind of get on the board early and protect your other threats. Rattle Chains allows you to play a little bit of a flash game. Spell Queller gives you a little bit of synergy as far as playing counter spells. Deputy of Detention and not Rattle Chains, Brazen Borrower allow you to have a little bit of interaction with non-creature things that have resolved, and then you have copies of Declaration and Stone, both on the main and the sideboard, to kind of clear out problematic creatures. Allow you to kind of race favorable winds, also acts as another buffer. This could be correct to have one or two of these. I don't think you want to be playing too many of these, as they don't impact the board other than what's already there. And then beyond that, Selfless Spirit to help protect your threats, protect against wrath and stuff. And then Smuggler's Copter, because if you're playing a decent amount of creatures, Smuggler's Copter, it loots, it's a threat, and it also gets boosted by your Empyrean Eagle, which is nice as well as favorable wins. Beyond that, you got Spectral Sailor, which could, in a longer game, could potentially draw you some cards. And then you have your bunch of blue-white duels, some unclaimed territories, one of Mutavault, which can be pretty reasonable with the other spirits. And beyond that, you playing some port towns, which play nicely with these hallowed fountains, islands, and plains. And so, just a general aggressive kind of curve to this deck. A whole lot of twos. When I was making the burn deck and some other things, I was considering, the number of ones, but I really think the emphasis in this format really comes down more to two mana spells. I think you can get away with not playing anything on one a lot of games. Certain decks obviously will have that, things like Attune with Ether or Hardened Scales or Thoughtseize or Fatal Push. But a lot of decks, the key to their curve is really going to start at 2. So I think that kind of plays into Pioneer being a little bit slower of a format. There still are some turn 4 kills. There are Aetherworks Marvel, potential kills with things like Emrakul or Ugin. You have things like the Copycat combo on turn 4, but a lot of other decks kind of get rolling and can threaten lethal on turn 4, turn 5. So it is a little bit slower than Modern, which I think is a nice, refreshing change. And there's big enough card pool that there isn't just one or two decks that dominate right now. Honestly, Wizards announced that there would be a ban update, I think, this coming Monday. I honestly, like I said, I haven't played a ton of the format yet, but I think the format might be in a good place. It might not need a banning yet, but I think they'll get a good idea after the PTQ whether there's anything that's outright dominating or not. A couple copies of Pithing Needle for Planeswalkers, Deputy of Detention for some more answers similar to Detention Sphere. 2 copies of Spell Pierce when you need to protect against non-creature threats. Can nail Planeswalkers or removal spells, Mystical Dispute for any type of blue-based deck. 2 copies of Remorseful Cleric when you need some anti-graveyard stuff. Authority of the Council is pretty good against the red decks, especially, or anything with haste. And then 2 more copies of Declaration and Stone when you need some early interaction. As a friendly reminder, if you like what you're seeing on the channel, please consider subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, leaving a constructive comment down below. As we're still trying to kind of fill out our roster as to what we're going to be doing in Pioneer, and we still continue to try to be the most informative lightning bolt based channel for Modern. Although Modern's popularity at the moment is currently waned a little bit with the introduction of Pioneer as everybody plays with the new toys. Anyways, on to the deck tech for Green-Black Delirium. Back for the deck tech for Green-Black Delirium. This deck is a little bit more deeper on the Delirium theme, so it may not be the optimal build. To that end, you're playing things like Satyr Wayfinder and Grimflayer and Smuggler's Copter to fill the graveyard. There are no copies of Deathray Shaman, which might be in incorrect, but I do find it is kind of hard sometimes to make Deathrite Shaman meaningful in the first couple turns of the game. So I've kind of shied away in this list, which was pretty much somebody's copied list side for side from one of the decks submitted on MTG Goldfish. I'm not going to take personal credit for it, but I did like the way this list is kind of designed. Fatal Push and Thoughtseize is kind of early interaction. Traverse as a potential way to get a basic lands to fix your mana in the early turns, as well as, when you have Delirium turned on, an ability to go fetch like a Cletus or a Emrakul to kind of close out the game. Lilion, the Last Hope, and Tireless Tracker kind of your late game cards, and then Scavenging Oozes and Grimflayers to be kind of your beef in the mid game, as well as Abrupt Decay and Assassin's Trophy rounding out the removal suite, and then copies of Smuggler's Copter, because if you're playing creatures, at least a fair number of them, Smuggler's Copter, it slices, it dices, it does what you want it to do. It's a card that got banned in Standard for crying out loud because it was just too ubiquitous, and it's a very, very powerful card for what it does. I don't think it's too powerful for this format, but I do think is a very powerful card that gives decks that are running a lot of creatures a lot of leverage and a lot of selection. Beyond that, got some more discard spells in the form of Duress and Collective Brutality for different matchups. Noxious Grasp for all the white and blue planeswalker, or white and green planeswalkers running around, things like Oko, things like Teferi, kind of must kill things on site. Veil of Summer, I'm not really sure about this inclusion. I guess it could be decent against counterspell decks, also could be decent potentially in discard mirrors. 2 more copies of Scavenging Ooze when you are up against other aggressive decks, and you want Scavenging Ooze to kind of be the last card standing, as well as against other graveyard decks like Kethis Combo or Rally the Ancestors, and then 3 copies of Grafdigger's Cage when you're facing any type of graveyard-based deck or any type of Collected Company deck. With that, let's get into some matches. Hey, we're back for match number 1, game number 1, from the perspective of Azorius Spirits. Again, Green Black Delirium. We're on the play, which is nice. This hand is a little land heavy, but we are running, I believe it's 22 or 23 lands. So I think this hand's perfectly keepable. I think I end up keeping this one. Yeah. And our opponent also keeps 7. So just lead on the planes here to give as way a little information as possible. Go ahead and lead on. Opponent does Grimflare here. Play Rattle Chains. This allows us to play a more instant speed game here. Play the Supreme Phantom during combat. Could have just done that main phase, but not like our opponent's going to interact here. I'm going to play Smuggler's Copter. They leave it back in a defensive position. We go ahead and attack, see if we can bait them into crewing the Copter. They go to block. They loot away, give them as little information as possible. Play the Phantom. So one of the big things here is this is Azorius Spirits getting to leverage against its opponent, not seeming like they have a lot of removal. And they're able to play the flash game with Rattle Chains, so this is probably not going to be... This is probably at the top end of your draws, other than maybe having a 1-drop, like a Mausoleum Wanderer or something. This hand is obviously a lot of pressure. Place a Tireless Tracker, once again seems to indicate they don't have a whole lot of... they couldn't attack with their 2-2 into our 3-5. Seems like once again they don't have any particular measures to play here. Holding Selfless Spirit in our hand to protect against a removal spell. Not that I think a removal spell here particularly matters, as they have a Smuggler's Copter. Get to trigger Grimflare. I guess they don't like what they see and they concede. So, I think part of the reason I wanted to see this particular matchup is there has been some talk of Azorius Spirits or Bant Spirits being pretty reasonable in the format, and I wanted to test it against a deck that, well, it's not a hardline control deck, it is a disruptive mid-range deck. I wanted to see in particular how Spirits would do something against something like that, because I suspect it has a pretty reasonable matchup against a lot of the combo decks. Could play an instant speed game against Copycat without the Teferi being in play. It can play a pretty decent game against the more controlling decks if it's able to play like the instant speed or just measuring out how it does its threats. But I wanted to see how about a deck that could both pressure it and disrupt it, how it would do against that. and then could always see how it does against the hyper-aggressive decks once they become more focused in the early to mid portion of this format. Anyways, on to sideboarding and game number 2. So as far as sideboarding, I was kind of mixing and matching with different things. I think this particular time I took out, or put in the 2 copies of Spell Pierce and just boarded out 1 copy of Spectral Sailor. Didn't board in any additional removal here. Hadn't quite realized that Deputy Detention is probably not where you want to be in this matchup, as they do have a lot of ways to remove permanents. So that's how I sideboarded against them. Might have been incorrect, but once again, so we're testing matchups, doing a little bit of housekeeping. This hand's pretty decent. We have the 1-drop into potential removal on 2 into a couple of lords. So definitely keeping this hand. Opponent leads on a 6-card hand. Just pass. We play Port Town. Play out Mausoleum Wanderer. They just fatal push it. So they get to play Grim Flare here. Just kind of annoying. We had 3 different lines here. We could have Declaration and Stone the Grim Flare. We could have bounced the Grim Flare with Brazen Borrower to set them back a turn. I instead choose to develop our board, since you generally want to be leveraging things when you're ahead. They get to deploy Tireless Tracker. We deploy the Eagle. Start trying to loot. We loot away the extra copy of the Looter Scooter here. We really looking for lands to help develop like double spell turns here. Not quite winning the race right now. Opponent shocks in. They get to set up their draw. They play Noxious Grasp, which is probably out of their sideboard. And sack a Clue for no apparent reason. We pass, as we missed on the land drop, unfortunately. Let them go to combat. We play Rattle Chains. Trigger that. Go ahead and block. Force them to sack a Clue. Get rid of the Eagle once again, wanting to be able to double spell, but I think we're significantly enough behind here that we're just not going to be able to recover in time, unfortunately. Couldn't play Declaration in Stone on their guy. Hold up Rattle Chains here, so in case they go to Liliana's here. Could have bounced the Grim Flare, but we're far enough behind that I think we kind of have to have a wing and a prayer here. They put a Fabled Passage and a Grim Flare in the graveyard. They crack a Clue. They have a Blast Zone. Protect our guy with a Rattle Chains. Spell Pierce is a little bit late here. We go and kill Liliana. They charge up their Blast Zone. Go ahead and bounce it back to their hand. That gives them the opportunity to blow up their Blast Zone. We play their Grim Flare. We now have 5. So we could try to like chump block this, but the thing has trample, so we're just kind of too far behind this game. Trying to use Spell Queller here to leverage something. They just play another Scavenging Ooze, and then we concede because we don't have enough here to block both their creatures effectively, and the fact that they're just kind of churning through their deck. So you got to see game 1, the Azorius deck, Azorius Spirits really leverage the tempo plus pressure aspect, and then this game you kind of got to see when the Spirits deck gets a little bit on the back foot that it does have problems recovering, unfortunately, because there's no like clear removal spell like Path to Exile in the format, so it's really kind of hard for this deck to play catch up. It does definitely play better from when it's ahead, so something to keep in mind when you're playing the deck is that it does tend to see like it plays better from ahead, and the Golgari deck seems like it has the ability to catch up a little bit better, but it's still a little bit clunky and mid-rangey, so I think both decks kind of have a snowball effect, and the green-black deck simply has better removal. So we'll see how that plays out in game number 3. So in our third game, we sideboard a little bit differently. I boarded out the 2 copies of Deputy of Detention that are in the main deck for the 3rd and 4th copies of Declaration in Stone just to have more hard removal against our opponent's creatures. This hand, unfortunately, is a mulligan. It's a one-lander that it comes into play tapped as it is. This hand is better, but I still think it could have easily been a mulligan. But we keep on 6, mainly because, like, it's just not good. So our opponent's obviously having some mana issues themselves. It looks like they kept a bit of a gamble hand and it didn't pay off for them right away. And good name Spirit there. They try to push the Supreme Phantom. I use the Mausoleum Wanderer to counter it. They have another Smuggler's Copter. Doesn't seem like they have a whole lot going on. We play a Smuggler's Copter, play another land. Playing that land there might have been a mistake, as that would give us something to discard to Copter. We get rid of one Declaration in Stone. It's not particularly good against the Smuggler's Copter mirror here. And then we play out another copy of Copter, holding up Spell Queller. We go ahead and Spell Quell that. Once again, it just kind of looks like they are stuck. So we fire up the Copters, get in for a lot of damage here. Spell Pierce could be pretty effective. And then our opponent just concedes because they didn't draw their mana screw. So that's another nice thing about being the more aggressive bent deck as opposed to green-black, which takes a little bit of time to win the game. Spirits can close out the game pretty quickly. Turn 5, turn 6, pretty reasonably, even through a little bit of disruption. So neither deck had their best draw. We mulligan to 6, had a 4-lander. They mulligan or didn't mulligan. Maybe they should have. They were probably missing a green source, and then their hand probably would have been unlocked. But sometimes that's the risk when you keep a little bit of a risky keep. Anyways, on to match number 2. Back here for match number 2, game number 1. Once again, from the perspective of the Azorius Spirits deck. We'll be on the draw, unfortunately, this game. This hand is interesting, but very clunky. A whole bunch of 3-drops. I think this hand is keepable, but could have been correct to mulligan here. Opponent leads on a Thoughtseize, takes our Detention Sphere. So it looks like they're going to try to get under our Spell Quellers, potentially with like a Grimflayer or something here. That's exactly what they lead on. Fortunately, no plays on 2. Opponent gets to kind of dump some spells in their graveyard. Gets a Liliana down. Go and pass here once again with Spell Quellers that they're fully well aware of. They attack in again. It is possible that we were supposed to try to block, but it has an Abrupt Decay anyway. Opponent now has a 4/4. Grimflayer doing Grimflayer things. Gonna go ahead and try to quell this. Opponent makes it an 0/2. Try to Detention Sphere the Liliana. So it might have been incorrect. It's possible we were supposed to try to Detention Sphere the Deputy of Detention, the Grimflayer, but Liliana getting close to ultimate could be problematic as well. And they get to Grimflayer us. Once again, no reason to block. They play Tracker. Opponent kind of doing the they're cracking a clue, so they probably have a removal spell on top. They have a trophy. Fortunately, that means they get back their Smuggler's Copter, so now our offense is completely blunted. They get to attack. Try to play the Eagle, go to block. Trade off with the Tireless Tracker so we don't die here. Unfortunately, our opponent continues to be able to attack. They play a Kalitas. Might have been incorrect there. They probably should have played the Kalitas before they activated the Liliana and the Selfless Spirit. And then, no matter what we do here, we're dead. So, if you block here, we're dead to the 4/4. We block here, we get trampled over for 1, and we're still dead. So, clunky hand. Probably needed a mulligan to a 2-drop there, but it is kind of hard against the deck with Thoughtseizes and potentially things like Despise in it to, mulligan a fairly decent 7-card hand. A little bit slow, but they obviously got the 1-2 combination of Grim Flare and Liliana down, so, it's one of the things when you don't run a ton of removal in the main deck, you are more vulnerable to starts like that. Kind of like the old Thoughtseize Inquisition and Tarmogoyf hands out of Rock and Jund in Modern. Anyways, on to game number 2 and sideboarding. On the sideboarding this time, I boarded out the 2 copies of Deputy Detention, 2 copies of Favorable Winds for the 2 copies of Spell Pierce, and the 2 copies of Declaration in Stone that are in the sideboard. Needed more removal against their faster starts, having the ability to kill a quick Grim Flare or quick Tireless Tracker. And Deputy of Detention obviously is kind of vulnerable to their removal. And Favorable of Winds doesn't really help against their removal in particular. So it's kind of a card you can feel free to cut, especially when they have Abrupt Decay and copies of Assassin's Trophy in their deck to potentially kill it. This hand's pretty reasonable. We have a 2-drop into a 3-drop. We can have a Declaration in Stone if they have early pressure. Lead on Hollowed Fountain here, since we don't have any turn 1 plays. Opponent leads on Thoughtseize. Takes the deck in Stone, so I guess they're going to try to leverage a very similar strategy as they did. Okay, Traverse, so it looks like they have a bit of a clunkier start themselves. There's a couple lines here. We could have taken Supreme Phantom and Mausoleum Wanderer, but this time I chose to leave up Spell Queller because it seems like they're actually a little bit starved on mana here. And even if they had something like a copy of Fatal Push there, they couldn't have been able to kill the Spell Queller this turn. This turn we leveraged the Smuggler's Copper and the Mausoleum Wanderer. They play Satyr Wayfinder, and they hit a... looks like they took the Forest. Traverse for Kalitas. So the problem for our opponent is that they don't have any effective flying blockers, so this is a lot of pressure in the air. Could have left Port Town, but Port Town would come to play tap this turn anyway, not allowing us to double spell this turn, and I guess our opponent just realizes they're just dead in the air. So once again, this matchup appears to be very much a snowball effect. Our opponent had a little bit of a... I mean, they played spells, don't get me wrong. They played 3/1 mana spells, they developed their mana, but just felt like they were too far behind on pressure. And just felt like they got too far behind that game. So once again, Blue-White Spirit's kind of able to leverage its pressure in the early turns to kind of kill our opponent quickly before they could really get set up in the early turns. And the disruption elements of Spell Queller gives this deck a lot of nice little hedge in what it's trying to do. Anyways, on to the third and deciding game in this match. Left the sideboarding the same for game number 3. Once again, Deputy a little bit fragile. Favorable Winds just doesn't do enough. It's not a threat in of itself. Doesn't really protect or make our opponent's removal any weaker, so this hand's pretty reasonable. It is a little land heavy, but we do have 2-drop and a 3-drop, which is pretty nice. Opponent goes Fabled Passage. Play tap land. Opponent does not crack. They play Overgrown Tomb. We draw Smuggler's Copter. Maybe they had a Fatal Push here. They traverse for a Forest. Play out the Forest. Play out a Scavenging Ooze. So it looks like our opponent's punt may have... or maybe they need to land really badly. I can't really tell. Once again, looting away. Though Empyrean Eagle is a very powerful card, and it is possible we could go Empyrean Eagle into Spell Pierce next turn, I think it was better to leave a more plethora of 2-mana spells that we could potentially double spell next turn. Once again, trying to disrupt our opponent just enough. Opponent went for Satyr Wayfinder here and bricked on a land, which I suspect they really needed a land to double spell this turn. play that in, play Selfless Spirits, use that to trigger the Smuggler's Copter, get rid of the lands, since 4 lands are about all we need with this hand. I had a couple different choices. I could play Rattle Chains or hold up Rattle Chains, or I could go Mausoleum Wonder plus Spell Pierce. I think that's a better combination of cards. Gives us more protection. But it goes ahead and attacks. But they are behind in this race. Trying to upkeep Noxious Grasp here. Spell Pierce, unfortunately for them, gets them. And then we have the Supreme Phantom and our opponent scoops. So, once again, small faux pas on our opponent's part, not cracking that Fabled Passage. I don't know if they were just auto-passing or what our fellow player that we were playing against was doing there, but definitely doing that hurt them, and as you see, Spirit snowballs pretty quickly, so I'm interested to see exactly what this archetype is capable of in the format moving forward, and I don't think there are too many cards at risk in this style of deck to get banned, other than potentially Smuggler's Copter could prove to be pretty ubiquitous throughout the format, but beyond that, I think this deck was a lot of blast to play. I think the things from the green-black Delirium side, it seems like their tools are a little more fragile, and I don't think this particular version of green-black Delirium was necessarily the best. I think if you want a better look at green-black Delirium in particular, or green-black Rock, take a look at the Grim Flare on YouTube here. He does an excellent job of green-black Rock content for both Modern and for Pioneer. I think we're going to be changing up the format of videos a little bit moving forward. I think instead of just doing random matches, I think we're going to do a little bit more of a gauntlet kind of thing, where we play a deck against like 3 or 4 different other decks that appear to be part of the meta or something similar to what's in the meta. That way people get a better idea of like different matchups of how a deck performs. Like say if we were to take Blue-White Spirits, we'd play against like say a red aggro deck, either an Aetherworks Marble or a copycat deck, and maybe like a removal heavy deck. That way you get a look at like 3 or 4 different archetype styles and how they mesh against a particular deck style. If you like that idea, please sound off in the comments. I think that's going to be what I do moving forward. I'm also going to be running a poll on whether people prefer the versus matchups or if they prefer leagues. The thing with these versus matchups is they do take a little bit longer time to develop and do. I think they are more useful from a information and learning the deck perspective than just playing through a random league and getting whatever matchups you get. I know some people enjoy watching decks, evolve and play in the live play, and I know some people can prefer this style of video expose. So if you want to let me know down in the comments or on the poll that I'll be putting up right around the time this video goes live, whether you guys prefer the live play leagues or if you prefer the versus videos. And like I said, obviously cost-benefit analysis, the live play leagues are a little bit quicker for me to record. These take a little bit longer because I have to play the matches out, see how they go, and then record the verses as I explain my play lines, and I could always go from my opponent's play lines if people are interested in seeing things from the other side as well. But I think it's kind of redundant to do the same videos both sides when you've already seen the matchups once. So anyways, if you guys are interested in seeing the other perspectives, I can always go into the account and do the walkthroughs for those videos as well. But I think usually seeing the matchup from once is good enough, though we don't always get to see the hand of our opponents. So anyways, just want to say thanks everyone for viewing. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as we aim to become the most informative Pioneer channel, in addition to the most informative Lightning Bolt based Modern channel on YouTube.